Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Anna Wilding Unstoppable, the podcast. Oh, I've got something so wonderfully delicious in store for you today, and that is humans keeping up with technology. And I'll explain my guest very, very soon. First, I'm asking all of you to subscribe. Please subscribe to Anna Wilding Unstoppable. You can go to annawildingunstoppable.com, the podcast links, iTunes, Good Pods, iHeart, YouTube. You will find us on your favorite platform. So now, I'm just having just looking at my engineer right now. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, it's really, really interesting. The US government, along with Space Force and the Air Force, plans to build quantum AI into the infrastructure probably by 2027. I don't know if they'll achieve that date. Some say it's going to be quicker. I've spoken to some rocket scientists. They said, yes, it could be within a year. We're almost already there. Some countries claim they are there. But whoever does this first is going to have unassailable power. And we're already in a multifaceted arms race with so many different technologies coming to us. And quantum engineering combined with AI is such a transformative power. And it is going to be highly disruptive. And as much positivity that can bring, there's also going to be some disruption in a way that could be hugely negative, especially in the areas of national security. Of course, anything to do with national security is a real concern. So, if adversaries can intercept our communications and cripple infrastructure, that's a real issue. But there's other issues that are also of concern. Quantum can supercharge AI. If it does that, the more breakthroughs we can get, the better. But it also risks ungoverned AI it will give it the ability to make decisions beyond human control. And I think that is a bailiwick in an area everyone is really concerned about going forward. Obviously, the ethical and economic fallouts without regulation on quantum AI could be a real problem. Now, AI itself is ungoverned. I personally think the rollout of AI has been highly questionable and actually, frankly, really irresponsible. I do know that when various DNA and genome tests came out around 2000, there were various ethic boards set up around the world when we did cloning to discuss how do we do this responsibly and ethically. In this case, it seems it's just been thrust upon us, rolled out. There's been multiple intellectual property and copyright breaches. And as much good and interesting situations it's creating, it's also creating a lot of problems. And the only real opportunity we have right now is to harness the next stage, which is quantum AI. Without framework, bad actors can cause a lot of problems, and that can escalate global tensions that already exist. We don't want to do that. We want to try and get this world moving forward everywhere to a world of peace. So our window is very small to get this right. Now, Elon Musk has said the window to get to Mars is very small because there's only going to be all these billionaires on this planet over the next 10 years, and we've got to do it now. But I think getting things like quantum AI right and a whole lot of other things on our planet is really important. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Remember to subscribe to annawildingunstoppable.com. Historically, regulation has always been lagging behind innovation. There is no question. And I wrote in a fun little book in 1993, technology does advance faster than our own personal growth. And by our own personal growth, I mean humankind. So I've brought into the studio today via Zoom a wonderful defense consultant who is going to drill down and help us understand how regulatory frameworks might work and if they are actually being discussed. Kate Jones, welcome.
Thank you very much, Anna. It's a pleasure. It's great
It's
to be
great to
on your
have
show.
you. I did not put my headphones on, so now I've put them on and now I can hear you loud and clear. It's absolutely great. It's a real treat to have you on, Kate. Kate, you have had an incredible career. I'm going to let you talk about aspects of that as we move ahead. A little bit like me, a lot of your career, some of it has been unseen, right? It's stuff that might happen behind the scenes that may not make it onto your main resume, but absolutely fascinating. So we'll talk about some things, and you will let us know what you can talk about in the geopolitical framework. First, I wanted to ask you about quantum AI and where we are at with regulation. What do you think? How important do you think regulation is?
Yeah, I mean, I think you start with some basic standards, and currently I'm working on a white paper on post quantum encryption across the Five Eyes. That is our intent, is to give some congressional guidance on what that might look like. Having a framework, we can go into the ethics or we can go into the security side on it. But if we start just with the security, that's always a great place to begin. And having agreed upon standards for ensuring the national security objectives is vital for multiple reasons. One is that we don't drop down something on another government that we work with, and suddenly private sector has to quickly rally and learn the new models, which obstructs business. But then also on the government side, it can be obstructive to government. So having agreed upon standards is a great way to begin. And that's probably the hardest start.
Right.
So with post quantum encryption, we're really looking for how do we protect infrastructure? How do we do our intelligence sharing? And then how do we ensure that there is a sort of operational standard that keeps everybody safe, in agreement, and in business? So
So,
I think that's kind of the start point.
yeah, so I have a question just for people who don't know. Five Eyes is a signal communication system. It's comprised of 5 countries: Canada, UK, Australia, United States, and New Zealand. And it basically monitors a lot of the audio and the conversations, online, offline, phone, telecommunications that happen around the globe, to make sure that bad actors aren't doing what bad actors do, or how to stem those problems. Kate, my question to you is, obviously you're working on this white paper that involves Five Eyes. That's great. What about the rest of the countries? How do you bring every country on board this? And how many countries do you think can be expected to come on board? As you work on the white paper, have you gone out to other countries beyond Five Eyes, or is this pretty much being conducted within that framework of Five Eyes?
Well, this is a recommendation and it's just a start point. And the reason to look at Five Eyes is it's actually an intelligence sharing
Right. Okay. Yeah.
apparatus,
Yeah.
right? So each country has its own individual approach, and
Yeah.
essentially it's just an opportunity to share in a secure way. And like when the NSA and other agencies are looking at their foreign partners, they're looking for can we share with you securely? Just
Right.
that's it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when you look at the other countries, well, can we share with you securely? There's your question.
Mm.
If you can, you can, and then you can operate together. And if you can create a standard with the people that you do trust,
Mm-hmm.
then that can go out to anyone. It's going to be a public white paper. Anyone can read it.
Right.
So anyone can adopt the standards that are developed from it. And it is, as I said, just a start point.
Right. And how do you think? Are you feeling positive about it?
Yeah, definitely. The idea comes from, if you'll recall, GDPR, which was it was about privacy standards for the EU. Those privacy standards were established. U.S. wasn't working with Europe; they were simply for Europe, and they were brought down. And all of a sudden, in the U.S., everyone was subject to them, even
Mm-hmm.
companies that weren't selling in Europe. So once you create a
Yes.
standard, everyone has to follow it. And
Yeah.
essentially, by laying a framework to begin to have discussions on anything,
Mm.
where we have so much interoperability,
Mm.
interactivity, intercommercial activity, and national security requirements, having a set standard is a good start.
Right. And yeah, Five Eyes is a international. I mean, it is an intelligence sharing network. I say signal communication. It doesn't really matter here or there. But so for people who don't understand, what is quantum AI? Let's drill down a bit on what qubits are. Would you like to start?
Well, I mean, the AI and quantum are separate
Yes,
fields.
they
And
are.
so If we start with, I'd start with AI. It's easier. Everyone's probably interacted at some point with a chat GPT or some sort of form of AI. And essentially, it's a real power suck, AI. And the more you want to use it, the more power you need. So it's not as simple as, well, we have this new tool, we're developing it at speed. We have all of these other infrastructure requirements that go around it. Like, step beyond ethics for a moment. It takes tons and tons of power and data centers to run any kind of AI operations. It's essentially a giant brain. We're not at that sort of the true AI where it has full agency. We're operating out of these language models. We're getting closer in some ways. But on AI, when we look just at the language models, one of our big national security threats was that when you look at China, what call it previously maybe an adversary in some ways, and now that's become very clear, especially due to Taiwan, where we're making all the chips, and we are, TSMC is such a critical part of that future in AI, and there's absolutely an intelligence race for AI. So start there and think about, well, we have this entire infrastructure that we have to build. China has 3-to-1 developers. That means they have 3 times as many developers. But the future that everyone perceived was going to come, which, geez, if I don't know how to code, I won't be part of this. We're going to lose all the people in the humanities. They won't be important. This was what has been said and has been out there and discussed for a while. And now, because of LLMs and the ability to process language, soon we'll be able to code without it. And we're starting to already. You can put something into a chat model and you can push out code and use that, right? Yeah. So pretty soon, it's actually the humanities majors will be the ones that do this brilliant prompting and fully understand this sort of wide open space. And they'll be prompting and creating things and collaborating with artificial intelligence and building. And they won't. And the developer suddenly sort of somewhat drops out of that.
Right.
But then you also need massive amounts of storage. Right. And this is the big problem for everyone. Speeding up, having the space for storage, the centers, and building that infrastructure out with a power grid that in the United States, roughly 80% of it is, a little wonky, let's put it, needs a lot of replacement, unstable, very old, out of date. And then power sources. So we're now looking at, well, can nuclear power plants fuel data centers to build AI in specific locations around the country to sort of get at this race? Add in quantum, because quantum's your encryption model. That's your security. So does that kind of give you that big picture?
Well, I think so. I think, the thing about quantum is, we're not quite there yet. Quantum's like spinning a coin. You have, when you code a computer, you have your ones and your zeros. I did a coding course years ago. I'm not a coder. It's not for me. I prefer other kinds of maths. But let's say the ones are yeses and the zeros are zeros. So you spin a coin, and in quantum computing, it's both the heads and the tails, right? It's doing it at once, right? So that gives you a superposition. And then you have a situation where the qubits can interact, like quantum entanglement, right? Where they can interact and they're linked with each other and they depend on each other's states, but it doesn't matter how far apart they are, right? So, but the upshot is this can all create and solve really complex problems. The problem is that quantum, it's like the Earth. The Earth has fault lines. It's a beautiful, perfect world, but it has earthquakes and fault lines. And when we're building quantum supercomputers, we're not building something that we're expecting to be faultless in any way. We're trying to build supercomputers that are resilient, right? And so at the moment, I think they're trying to solve that gap of how do we make a quantum computer that it can make order out of its own chaos and not make any mistakes. Now, I know there's 5 or 6 or 7 companies that are doing that: IBM, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, D-Wave, a couple of others. Of course, the government labs are doing it as well. But they do need to work in with AI, from what I understand. It is going to be quantum AI. It is going to be combined. And the data centers are going to be huge, whether they use nuclear power or other forms of energy, solar. I know one of the government labs was talking about using solar or wind. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I understand. And then we look at where the build out, like NVIDIA, is that how you pronounce NVIDIA, is doing a huge,
NVIDIA.
Yeah, it's doing a huge build out of AI. It's agreed to invest 500 billion, was it, or 500 million? Million doesn't seem enough for some reason.
Yeah.
It's like in this world, big boys throwing around all these big figures with zeros on it. And so, and there is an energy crisis. There has been in the United States. And I think people are just realizing now how behind in terms of our critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, we have become. I mean, you only have to look at developments that are happening overseas, whether it's nuclear reactors or other forms of power. Other countries have kind of leapt ahead in the energy and clean energy environment. So what's also intriguing me about this development is where are they building these centers that you know? I mean, I do know a couple that are being built through a couple of the government labs, but where else are they being built?
Well, I think there's some land that's going to be given over, but I think this has to be thought out very carefully, because you also have to have people in that loop. I would take some guesses that we'll have something out by Langley.
Right. Yeah.
We'll be looking at the intelligence agencies and powering up places like NASA and others, and some of the larger companies where you already have where you have some structure, but you need some space, right? And if you're going to go nuclear, you need cooling. So now you have to think about water supplies. So those are all the sort of considerations in building something like that, and the capital raise too. And I mean, of course, we're also stepping into, maybe it'll be laser fusion. We're getting closer and closer to that being something that gets better understood and people are trying to invest in. So on the power side, it's like, that's your one piece, that first piece. Like, you have to have power to be able to do this. You need space. You need ways to cool things down. And that quantum piece is also about speed. So imagine you have your artificial intelligence layer. You've got fantastic chips, high-speed chips that have been developed, and you're off to the races. You have your power supply. Quantum is about increasing the speed of your compute, just faster. You're equating faster and faster and faster, as well as more securely. That's the objective of quantum computing. Whereas AI is the brain of all of this. And then when you look at companies like NVIDIA and others who are making these super chips we're trying very hard, the United States trying very hard to protect who gets a hold of those are the ones that are going to be making that sort of the robotics of the future, the autonomous side, all of this stuff, the optimization of logistics, all of the things that are being worked on now. So that whole future. And I think that, if I might, think for a moment, instead of just the fears and the worries and the concerns, having a collaborative machine where you can work, develop, and design through AI, it's a future for everybody. You know, anything you want to write a poem, you want to get better, you want to learn something, you want to have more distributed education, higher qualities of education across the country. So all of these things, a collaborative approach to AI, design, anything you're thinking of, you basically get another brain, and a brain that understands you and works with you and begins to model and mirror you.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely AI for all its better and its worse. I mean, it has ripped off a lot of known authors. I'm one of the people whose screenplay has been targeted and ripped off, one of my screenplays, but not some others. I think they've taken 9,000 screenplays. They've taken like 10,000 books. There's all those issues. They're running through the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals right now. But the reality is, no one's going to stop ChatGPT. ChatGPT, Grok, whatever it is.
Grok, yeah.
because they need it to move to the next stage, right? So
Yes.
all our fights, anyone who owns IP, it's kind of futile. In fact, I've heard,
Musicians, I mean,
yeah,
that's really appalling. Yeah,
yeah,
well, this is the classic problem. Because when I talk about collaboration, I'm talking about for the individual collaborating,
right,
not necessarily ripping off someone else's stuff, because we
yeah,
have rules.
yeah,
Those rules are clearly broken. There are existing laws, but we can't even keep up with the number of people who've been ripped off.
yeah,
And we can't get behind what the LLM pulled something off of. You know, these are copyrighted texts
right,
that they may be taking them. Yes, major problem. And it's always the same story. We innovate so fast, we fail to look at the security, and we fail to look at the legal structure behind it. And we can't help ourselves because the builders and the security people are kind of different people. You know, I always talk to cybersecurity people and they want to put limitations on something to keep the walls up and keep it all secure. And then I talk to people who are engineers and they want to build this thing and they're so far off to the races in excitement. Boom, here's this thing. You know, that happened with the internet initially. This is just what we do.
yeah.
So yes, that is a problem set.
Yeah, and I think that's something just happening with microreactors right now is, you know, the engineers are off to the races and cybersecurity is like, wait, hold on a minute. You know, we need computers to help operate this, and hold on, our cybersecurity is not up there yet. I mean, like, I mean, there's just lots of issues, and of course, there's new technology coming down with those nonstop. I'll do a whole different segment on that another time. So I hear that China's putting out training 230,000 scientists a year. I mean, and computer programmers a year. I mean, that's a lot. They're ahead in so many advancements right now. And I think America now, with some of the regulations released, will be able to play catch up and get things going. I wonder, you know, I think about states like West Virginia. I think, getting back to my original question about where all these data centers are going to be, because it was coal mining and then they were going to do Bitcoin mining. Now they're bringing coal back there. But, you know, there's I do know where some of the AI centers are happening, but these are also other areas I'm sure that are being looked at. Kate, I want to move on and now talk about some other things that you've done in your life. In particular, the fact that I think speaking of security, I think you found yourself in Ukraine recently. Is that correct? And
I actually haven't been back since about May, but I do interact a lot with the people in Ukraine. In fact, if you can see it behind me, there's a Russian ammo can I pulled out of a Russian encampment. It was in Ukraine in a battlefield.
Okay, so that's great. Let's talk about this, because our listeners do not know what you did in Ukraine, and that the fact that you went over Russian front lines, I think. Let's talk about that. How did you come to be in Ukraine? What took you over the Russian lines, and when was this?
Oh yeah, so this was at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and in many ways at the time, I mean, most things I'm driven by curiosity, but and also this was, as it was produced and shown, this was an invasion in which civilians were being also attacked, not just attacks on infrastructure or you know, if you remember what they had called it at the very beginning, something of a liberation of areas. But this was an attack in Europe on sovereign territory. And the way it was being described was inadequate. And I happened to be out there. I was studying sensors at Oxford. And I was actually meant to go and do some yoga in Bali. And I thought, wow. I stopped in Krakow and I met some people in an elevator in a hotel. And they were delivering children out of orphanages under fire, and asked for some help. And of course, immediately I started helping, going off and buying diapers and, you know, clothes for children. And they took me to the refugee camps, and I ended up, next thing you know, I'm sleeping in a refugee camp doing the overnight intake. And then I'm next thing in Ukraine, out to go to deliver an ambulance and medications to Kharkiv. At the time, that was really, people were living in the subways. We couldn't make it. Everyone sort of dropped out in the end, and there I was in Ukraine. So I did have that level of curiosity to really fully understand what was happening there. And I spent a significant amount of time And I was out primarily doing humanitarian work and delivering food and fuel, and also just working on trying to help the local population. And yes, we had yeah, I knew a number of media companies and had interacted with them as well. I worked with people who were delivering IED services. Those are the deminers, help bring them in and make introductions to the government. And I got involved in various ways while I was there. It was an incredible time to meet an incredible people. Some of the most creative and compelling people I've ever met, and many of them who are not here now. So,
Mm.
yeah, I hope that explains it to a degree. I probably won't get too deep on some of the things I saw and did there, but very
Yeah.
very dear to me.
Can I ask what you saw when you went over the Russian lines, or you don't want to talk about it, which
Oh
is
yeah,
fine.
sure. I mean, that was easy.
Yeah.
The thing is, it sounds more significant than it is. There's a very long line, and it's
Right.
porous.
Yeah.
And we just happened to be there was a UN depot, and it had formerly been a place where people had brought goods and blankets and things, just had been servicing it. And since
Mm-hmm.
2014, they had no electricity.
Mm-hmm.
So we took a van in, we got shot at. I remember my friend Justin said, "Are we being shot at?" And I'm like, no one's bleeding, no one's screaming, we're good. Um, so, yeah, I figured they probably had bad aim. No problem. And we delivered van loads of blankets and fuel and food, and that was to everyone. I mean, they were probably Russian sympathizers and Ukrainian sympathizers, and these are just people stuck and trapped in war, which you frequently would see. These zones where people didn't have the ability to leave were, still people like where many of my colleagues were in body armor and armed, and there are people riding bicycles because they're just at home. They don't have the ability to just pick up and leave, and that's the tragedy of that whole space. Is just there are people trapped there, and I don't know how many now. But and we don't talk about humanitarian aid corridors, but we sure should.
Yeah, we should. And I think it's one of the awful things about war, isn't it? And, even in World War One, we saw this. They took a Christmas day and all sides played soccer or something with each other because at the end of the day, a lot of these wars are between governments and territories. It's not between the people of every country, right? And the people of every country just go through these massive events that are
Yeah, well, it
absolutely
gets that way
terrible.
pretty fast when you start losing people and you're defending your home. And I think that's something that happened for the Ukrainians. There had been a lot of integration in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine.
Hmm.
That quickly melted away
Right.
um, in the full scale invasion. The sentiments were very clear. Things were very easily drawn. And some Russians actually came over and were on the Ukrainian side. That's not to be forgotten. So, this one's different, I think, because it's sovereign borders, and there's a lot more clarity and sense of this is my home. Uh,
Right.
for sure, there are territories like the reason that Crimea went, which was kind of the first step. Obama had come out with a fairly recent statement that had said it was very Russian. Um,
Hmm.
but these are problems we have. Migratory patterns, whether or not people are pushed into zones and then they suddenly declare it because they're on it.
Hmm.
Um, now we're getting into the politics of war. So I
Yeah.
think it's actually kind of interesting what's shifted, though. If you really want to get into a good discussion about what changed, like we were very European folks focused from the United States, and very recently, commitment to NATO, but discussion about Europe defending itself, which I think Nixon first brought up. But it's been a long time that sort of that defensive posture, and I'm not talking about missile defense and nuclear deterrence. I'm talking about the sort of the more basic. Do you have enough tanks? Do you have enough people? Are they trained and equipped and prepared? And that's something the United States is very much held for Europe. And now there's this massive shift, even despite the war in Europe, over to the Indo-Pacific. And why? And
Hmm.
so this goes back to our AI conversation and quantum conversation, where we're seeing massive amounts of development and development of a new superpower that's now reaching points of parity. with the United States. And that entire region's under threat primarily because Taiwan makes all of the chips. Those chips, they're making them because they're so sophisticated, and they make them at a size of I won't get this right, but it's like the nanometers. The size is so small, no one else in the world can do it. And you also, so it's an economic choke point, and then it's also a shipping traffic choke point. So you have a technological and economic and a free shipping and military choke point right there around Taiwan. It's like 88 miles. And this place, combined with one company in the Netherlands that makes these specialized equipment to make chips, that's your major problem set. I think they cost like 200 million each. They fit on a jumbo jet, this special ultraviolet light. To make these chips. And so this is like the power structure of the globe right now, is the chips that are made in Taiwan at these specialized factories, one supplier in the Netherlands that can provide the equipment to make the chips, and then over in the United States, these big companies like NVIDIA, who you've mentioned, that make these super computing capabilities that everybody needs. And then you put that all into, now we have this choke point. And that's why the shift has gone away from Europe. And that's why, right. And economically, how do you protect that region? Do you protect that region? And you see this sort of race to be able to make things here in the United States. NVIDIA, I think, just made another investment in the factory that's out in Arizona. But that's going to take time.
Well, it's going to take time, and even the protection of that region in Taiwan. So the AUKUS agreement was just signed fairly recently, as you know, between Australia and the United States and the UK, and that is to help protect that region. And now, of course, they're finding that there's a lot of regulations that the building that they were planning to do in Australia of the submarines and new technology there to guard some of to guard this region has been delayed by more regulations. So they might have got the ships in, but not the regulations to build certain technology and train certain staff on that technology. It's getting quite complicated, compounded by the fact that what war is China actually even engaging in terms of how it's doing it. So
right, irregular warfare.
Yeah, so I have heard strongly through sources that China's actually not looking at a physical war. They're looking at a propaganda war. They're looking at a war of hacking computers. They're looking at a war of winning over the minds of the American public. And I keep that in mind when I look at this tariff situation. And as you know, I'm sure as a woman, Kate, I think every woman knows right now on the planet that China has recently removed all its regulations from all its handbag manufacturers and clothing manufacturers who've been manufacturing Hermes and Chanel and Nike and all these brands for European companies and American companies. And the Chinese government has removed the regulations and told these companies that they can now come out in the open and say that they've been making these bags for years for Hermes, but they just get shipped to Hermes, and then Hermes puts the gold, the clasp on, the palladium hardware. And so now the Chinese are inviting every American woman under the sun through TikTok, Instagram, and every single social media platform to buy these bags for $200, $150 instead of, $38,000 or whatever they are. And that really is a propaganda war right there.
Economic warfare.
Yeah,
we are in an age of economic warfare, for sure.
Yeah, there's no question.
Yeah. So, lawfare, economic warfare, and most importantly, information warfare.
Yeah, information warfare. So I think America, America's very smart. It's got very smart minds, but it's going to be really interesting how this battle is fought. I remember was it Kabul or one of those things? I was literally at a dinner and I had the head of communications or PR for one of the American military divisions and the PR for Kabul or something. And they said this is a paper war. Yes, there's some issues on the ground, but basically this is a war that's going to be won on paper, right? So we never completely understand, especially with so many departments and divisions of defense and different areas, exactly how wars are being fought. And I'm not even sure that with such large militarization that always there is cohesion. I mean, there's strength, especially in physical power, but how do we and are we going to be able to cope with massive propaganda economic war from China, which I think has already started? I mean,
it's been around a long time.
Yeah.
I think we just weren't engaging ourselves in that sort of space.
Yeah.
The psychological operations, the influence campaigns. We see that from all of the adversaries. It's been going on a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, we probably need a better apparatus for that. But I think the direction is hard power right now. It's and I would call that part of hard power. Irregular warfare is part of hard power. You saw all of the changes coming out of USAID and this sort of giant complex of soft power. Influence in creating journalism hubs, and there were many things that they did in the humanitarian side, but also in the media side. So USAID was American soft power, but was it working? And as you look at our projections, what's happening in our globe, we're going to be looking at droughts. We have a soil layer that is so depleted that one worries and wonders if we will be able to produce the kind of agriculture to feed the people. We see the sort of weather patterns, the storms and the rising sea levels. And some of that is nature. And some of that, I'm not going to go into global warming because I don't know much about that. So, but I will say that there are definitely these changes and some places will be less livable. And then we're going to see massive levels of migration, restrictions on food supplies. Do we need to influence people there? No. So suddenly you're looking at border control, the avoidance of having mass migration. How do you deal with the people that you can help, right? How can we as a globe help the people we can help? How do we feed the people we can feed? And how do we protect? And what is our sort of security apparatus around that? And how do we optimize and go through this technological age as well and engage in a space war? So we've got a lot of stuff on our hands.
It's a lot. And I had an investor say to it, we're not going to talk investors. We're not accredited investors. We don't know anything about investing for the purpose of this podcast. But, when investors who invest in these spaces say, I'm confused, there's so much happening, there's so much coming out everywhere, you realize that it's a lot. I mean, it is a lot. Kate, thank you so much. I have one quick question. How long did you live in London for?
Oh, I think off and on for about 9 years.
Yeah, that's a good amount of time. I lived
there.
That was
great. I love London.
I did too.
I have daughters who live there. I just love the place.
Yeah, it's one of my homes. I lived there for 5 years, but I come from a very European-centric background, so I consider it one of my homes, and I'm long overdue for a dose of London. London, when you enjoy it, is a great, great, great city. There's no question about it. So,
well, I suggest we meet in London next time.
Yeah, sounds great. Kate, thank you so much for coming on. We'll love to have you on again. Have a beautiful, beautiful day. That was very enlightening. Really appreciate it. I love the perspective that you brought to bear today, and we'll hope to see you again soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye. Again, thank you very much. Thank you very much for Kate Jones to coming on today. You're on Anna Wilding. I'm on Anna Wilding Unstoppable. You're listening to Anna Wilding Unstoppable. Sign up, subscribe. Wherever platform you go to, that's where you want to be, and you want to subscribe to Anna Wilding Unstoppable. We're going to keep coming out every 2 weeks or every month with more great, great shows on different topics. We're going to keep drilling down on more tech and science and physics and energy as we move along, but interspersed with a whole lot of other great topics. We hope you're having a beautiful, beautiful day. Me and my team here, I've got Christian over there who's absolutely fantastic and rock's best engineer under the sun. Not going to tell you where you can find him because he's with me. He's my engineer. Anyway, no, he's great. He's wonderful. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day. And remember, if you want to sponsor the show, donate. Donations are welcome. Help keep us going. Help these lively conversations go on and on and on and on. Okay, thank you so much, everyone.